AquaWales is trying to address problems of how to make aquaculture, that's fish farming, more sustainable. And this is really important because we're increasingly reliant on fish farming as a way to produce fish for food, because we really can't now rely on traditional fishing. We're sort of really taking away all these fish from the seas and things, and this is really decreasing their population. So we really need to be farming fish as a method of food production. So two of the biggest problems in aquaculture and fish farming is that first of all there's disease. Another is also that we're now beginning to move different species of fish all over the world to places they shouldn't be usually. And there's this potential then they can escape into the natural environment and then become what we call invasive species. And these are the two main questions that AquaWales are sort of trying to look at in terms of trying to make more sustainable and better intensification that's going to benefit not only us in terms of production of fish but also for the environment. So what I'm doing here is looking at a small juvenile fish, what we call a fry, and looking at what sort of parasite load they have on there. So if you see that on the skin and on the fins of the fish, we have these very small, tiny little, almost microscopic worms which attach and proliferate on the fish, and these can cause really bad problems in fish farms. Because the fish are often kept in close conditions and they're transferred from one fish to another, usually by very close contact, that they can spread very rapidly and cause massive issues in farms. And they can make the fish very sick, and obviously then this is an economic issue for the fish farmers themselves.
Here in Swansea we're trying to investigate how the stress associated with the intensification of agriculture might be leading to an increase in disease susceptibility in farm fish. So we're really trying to understand the mechanisms responsible behind this. So we're looking at things like the microbiome and epigenetics, and if we can understand these mechanisms, it might give us an idea of how we can mitigate these risks associated with intensification.
At the Cardiff School of Biosciences Genomics Hub, we are taking the tissue samples that we take from healthy and sick fish and characterise how their genes are being expressed, or essentially how they're being switched on and off. So we take from the tissue sample, we extract something called RNA, which is sort of a messenger molecule from taking your DNA or your genes and telling it what's being switched on and off. And feeding this into what we have here is a next generation sequencing machine, and this essentially is really sort of sequencing this RNA many times at very high level of detail for us to really get a really good feel of all the different genes that are being switched on and off in any particular tissue of the fish.
We are looking to detect aquatic invasive species, for example the signal crayfish and Chinese mitten crab. So when we go out in the river and we collect our environmental DNA samples, and from this we can spin the water in a centrifuge, and that allows us to create a DNA pellet which we can then extract the DNA from. So when we put the DNA into this plate with our mixture, it allows us to create longer fragments which we can then analyse looking at the computer screen. Analysing the DNA from the river allows us to see where this species is without ever having to actually see the animal itself. So it is a very non-invasive tool for sampling species, and it's kind of like an early detection mechanism. So we can say, right, there are signal crayfish here, this is an area we need to concentrate on and focus our efforts of trapping to remove signal crayfish, and also areas to preserve our current native crayfish populations, because the main problem with the decline of our native crayfish is presence of the signal crayfish. So if we can use environmental DNA to find signal crayfish when they're still in very low abundances, we can do something about it before it becomes so much of a problem that it actually removes the native species from an area.
Well, aquaculture is increasing in Wales, and it's likely to continue increasing in the future.
Around 1 billion people now on the planet are actually relying on fish farming as their sort of primary source of fish protein.
Aquaculture is a really good way of providing high quality protein, and that will become even more important for food security in the future.